feet or so.
Ready, comrade.
Air is deceptive stuff. Even at sea level, we tend to think of the air as being ethereal and all but weightless. In fact, it has plenty of bulk, and that bulk often exerts itself. As a marine scientist named Wyville Thompson wrote more than a century ago, we sometimes find when we get up in the morning, by a rise of an inch in the barometer, that nearly half a ton has been quietly piled upon us during the night, but we experience no inconvenience, rather a feeling of exhilaration and buoyancy, since it requires a little less exertion to move our bodies in the denser medium. The reason you don't feel crushed under that extra half-ton of pressure is the same reason your body would not be crushed deep beneath the sea. It is made mostly of incompressible fluids, which push back, equalizing the pressures within and without. But get air in motion, as with a hurricane or even a stiff breeze, and you will very quickly be reminded that it has very considerable mass. Altogether, there are about 5,200 million tons of air around us. When you get millions of tons of atmosphere rushing past at 30 or 40 miles an hour, it's hardly a surprise that limbs snap and roof tiles go flying.
Unit ready.
The process that moves air around in the atmosphere is the same process that drives the internal engine of the planet, namely convection. Moist, warm air from the equatorial regions rises until it hits the barrier of the tropopause, the boundary between the troposphere and the stratosphere, and spreads out. As it travels away from the equator and cools, it sinks. When it hits bottom, some of the sinking air looks for an area of low pressure to fill and heads back for the equator, completing the circuit. At the equator, the convection process is generally stable and the weather predictably fair. But in temperate zones, the patterns are far more seasonal, localized, and random, which results in an endless battle between systems of high-pressure air and low. Considering the practical and psychological importance of the weather to nearly everyone, it's surprising that meteorology didn't really get going as a science until shortly before the turn of the 19th century, though the term meteorology itself had been around since 1626, when it was coined by A. T. Granger in a book of logic. Part of the problem was that successful meteorology requires the precise measurement of temperatures, and thermometers for a long time proved more difficult to make than you might expect. An accurate reading was dependent on getting a very even bore in a glass tube, and that wasn't easy to do. The first person to crack the problem was Daniel Gabriel Fahrenheit, a Dutch maker of instruments, who produced an accurate thermometer in 1717. However, for reasons unknown, he calibrated the instrument in a way that put freezing at 32 degrees and boiling at 212 degrees. From the outset, this numeric eccentricity bothered some people, and in 1742, Anders Celsius, a Swedish astronomer, came up with a competing scale. In proof of the proposition that inventors seldom get matters entirely right, Celsius made boiling point 0 and freezing point 100 on his scale, but that was soon reversed.
Comrade.
The person most frequently identified as the father of modern meteorology was an English pharmacist named Luke Howard, who is chiefly remembered now for giving cloud types their names in 1803. Howard divided clouds into three groups: stratus for the layered clouds, cumulus for the fluffy ones, the word means heaped in Latin, and cirrus, meaning curled, for the high, thin, feathery formations that generally presage cold weather. To these he subsequently added a fourth term, nimbus, from the Latin for cloud, for a rain cloud. For all the heft and fury of the occasional anvil-headed storm cloud, the average cloud is actually a benign and surprisingly insubstantial thing. A fluffy summer cumulus, several hundred yards to a side, may contain no more than 25 or 30 gallons of water, about enough to fill a bathtub, as James Treffill has noted. You can get some sense of the immaterial quality of clouds by strolling through fog, which is